an Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering Dark, Season 3, Episode 4, The Origin. In this episode, I'm really going to need you guys to bear with me on this. It's been a long time since I've covered this show, and I low-key have no idea what's going on anymore. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everyone. I am Natasha. Thank you very much to Yama for commissioning this episode. And I want to preface this appreciation for Yama with a supplication for patience. The last episode of coverage, which actually, it wasn't even a scheduled episode, if I'm not mistaken. It was a slot that opened up because something else finished early. And I believe it was Yama who said I could use the slots that I had left for whatever I liked. And Dark had come out with its third season, and I was very excited. So I used a couple of slots for Dark to start early. At this point, I can't decide if it was a mistake to do that or if it wouldn't have made a difference, because it's the last recording was July 31st. It wasn't even quite August yet. And so we've got August, September, October, November, December. It's been a little over 5 months. And this is a really complicated show. And I am really worried that I'm not going to be able to do the rest of this justice unless I go and rewatch the first 2 seasons, and I just don't have time to do that. So I am a little concerned at this point on what's going to happen, especially considering that this is how I'm feeling now and this season just came out. There's going to be a 4th season, and I'm going to have to figure out how to handle that if people want to continue commissioning it when obviously there's a full year between season drops. So what am I going to do in circumstances like that? All that to say, there are so many moments this episode where somebody is called by name and I recognize the name, but I can't place who they are in the scheme of things. Or somebody appears and I am I know who this person was in some early episodes, but I can't remember what happened with them recently. A lot of things like this that I am going to either need your help for, I am going to need your patience with, or I am going to have to find time to go back and rewatch, and I can't guarantee that I'm going to do that. Not only because I would rather not spend my spare time doing work stuff when I don't have very much spare time to begin with, but because it feels sort of unfair sometimes for certain shows to get way more energy put toward them than other shows, which is part of the reason that I originally had a 2-month gap limit between episodes of things. Again, I don't really know what to do about that now that this is an ongoing show with so much time between season drops. So, Ryan says season 3 is the final season. Hi, Ryan, by the way. Is it really? Wow. That makes me feel very different about this whole thing than knowing that this is the last season. They've decided that the story is wrapped up. I am shocked. I don't mind telling you guys. So yeah, just huge apologies, everybody. I'm going to do my best. I'm going to ask for help. And there's going to be some, only a couple weeks, I think, between this and the next Dark episode. So it won't be a huge wait this next time. And hopefully in that gap, I'll be able to refresh myself enough that it won't be a complete mess next time. But I'll be honest, while I was watching this, I started to get a little teary-eyed because I felt so overwhelmed by how lost I was watching it. And I hate that feeling. That's not something that happens to me often at all. I'm very good at keeping track of a lot of different plots from a lot of different shows and books at once. and this was just over my head in a lot of spots. So, with that said, I just want to be upfront with y'all where I'm coming from on this. Let's get started. And I'm going to be playing this while I talk about it, because that way I can actually read dialogue word for word and hopefully give a better idea of what I'm talking about when I inevitably am like, what is this happening right now? So, first of all, I'm going to talk about the title being the origin, which obviously what we find out at the end of the episode is everything has been sort of orchestrated not to prevent the apocalypse like they've been told, but for Jonas and Martha to have sex and start the whole cycle. Because apparently the two of them create what Adam winds up calling the seed. She gets knocked up, is what we're, And I don't know if we have any inkling who the child is. If it's something that, if it's supposed to be, see, this is where I'm getting mixed up. If it's supposed to be, is it Trondheim? The one who winds up in the home and he's showing the girl his scars a little bit later on. I'm going to go to Meta Witches and see if they have that like tree at the bottom with all the character names. No, they don't. Not anymore. But I just am not, I don't know if I'm supposed to know or have a theory on who their child is going to be, or if it's meant to be a complete shock. I don't know if this kid, that this trio of creepy dudes with the hair lip and the murderous rage are their kid. I would hope not. I don't feel like everybody would be working towards making sure that kid came to be. But also I don't understand the motivations of a lot of people in this show, because what they're actually working towards is still hidden. And so, yeah, we start off this episode in the woods. It's clearly back in, is it the 40s? And we've got him, and I believe it's Trondheim. Forgive me. I will find out in a second, though, because they'll say his name. Walking around in the woods, and he comes up against the cave and stops and stares at it in this way that really gives you the sense that he is being pulled toward it somehow. There's something in him that really wants to check it out. And there are some iron bars across it in this moment, too, which I wasn't sure if that was something that we've seen before. I have never noticed the iron bars across it, but he's standing there looking at this cave, and then the middle creepy man calls out that we're attracted to the dark like moths are drawn to the light. And he steps out with his menacing face, and he is Tronte. Not Trondheim. Tronte. I was so close. He tells him, he gives a sort of a suggestion because of saying, like, you look like your mother. I knew her, but that was long ago. And hands him a bracelet that used to be hers. Says, you take after her. All of this is sort of giving Tronte the idea that this is his father. But there's no confirmation of that, and I can't personally decide whether that's anything. It's natural for him to think that's what this guy is sort of suggesting. But I don't remember if we know already who his dad is. I don't think so. And this dude just doesn't strike me as somebody that a woman would ever sleep with. I just can't see it. He is as creepy as a kid, as he is as a middle-aged man, as he is as an old man. And I don't see any period in there where he's uncreepy enough for any woman to fuck him. So I'm saying he's not anybody's dad. Now, I may be wrong about that. I don't know where, maybe somewhere in there was a non-creepy segment of his life. We'll see. But whether or not he actually is this kid's father, it feels like he wants him to think that he is his father. He says, back then it was me who chose what to call you. I don't have a name. So I'm assuming he is, but we don't have any evidence. And I don't know that this guy has motivation to lie about it, but I also don't know that he doesn't because I don't know what he wants. I am going to take him at his word, I guess. Why not? Sure. Go ahead. You're his dad. And it's such a shame, this moment, because Tronte, you can see when he says, I'm the one who chose what to call you, there's a longing in his face for a split second of just like, oh my God, my father, I never knew who you were. Here you are. And then he is caught from behind by the old man in the kid version. And it goes from a moment of hopefulness for him to this immediate dread and just mystified, like what is going on here. And this man gives him the bracelet that's like a snake eating its own tail. What do they call that again? Oberos? Something like that. Which is, of course, the like symbol for a circle has no beginning. The ending is the beginning. The usual thing that has been talked about a lot in this show. And he walks away, and this is I think in this episode is the first time that we see multiple people meet up with these like this deathly trio and not wind up murdered. Because they've killed almost everybody they fucking come across previous. But in this episode, they talk to him. They talk to what's his face's wife, the cop. Can't remember his name. And they talk to the gentleman who was responsible for signing the building permit to build the nuclear power plant. And none of those people wind up dead. It certainly feels like they will. In the moment, I definitely thought at least one of them was going to get killed. But I just don't really know what they're all after. So that's part of it, is being so certain they're going to just kill somebody simply because I haven't got a good grip on why they kill who they do and why they've killed the people they have so far. Rashawn's here. Hi, Rashawn. Rashawn, help. I don't know what's happening. All right. So he walks away, and eventually I'm just going to kind of talk about what goes on with him in full a little bit later. I wish so much that this show, that Netflix in general, had Amazon X-Ray, because that is something super helpful for when I don't know people's names by heart. But there is a conversation between a bunch of girls later in the woods who are looking through a dirty magazine one of them stole from her dad. And they're talking about boys and have you ever seen a dick before that wasn't your dad's dick? And they're all like, you know, I appreciated, see, guys, names. I'm going to just do it. I'm going to go to IMDb and I'm going to just pray that there's no spoilers in it. But they are all very honest with each other, which I kind of appreciated because I sort of expect kids in this position to not really tell one another the truth a little bit. And so, okay, we've got Jana, Claudia, and Inez. Is that right? Is that who I'm looking at here? And is Inez... I hope I'm right about this. Inez is the one that has the dirty magazine because she also has the mole on her face, if I'm not mistaken, right? Jana is the one with the two braids who winds up talking to Tronte later. And Claudia is the one who actually is like low-key with Tronte, even though it doesn't feel like he sees it that way, but she definitely does. And Jana is the one that he marries, but Claudia is the one that he has an affair with. I've got it straight now, I think. Ho! I feel pretty proud, honestly. So, Jana is, she's sort of in the position of, like, Hannah, except that she actually does get the guy, but she doesn't, really, because it turns out that he's, like, still actually interested in somebody else. And there's something sort of tragic about seeing these people who, like, long for a person, and for whatever reason, it doesn't work out, or it looks like it does, and then it doesn't. There's just, it's very bittersweet. But she comes and sits with him, and he has decided to skip school after this encounter with this weird guy, which I just don't blame him for at all. Some dude shows up, low-key acts like he's your dad, gives you something that used to be your mom's, and then we find out that, like, his mom disappeared, he didn't know who his dad was, and he was put in a foster home, and he shows her this scar because she says, "What was that like?" He shows her these scars all up and down his arm where somebody clearly was putting out, like, cigars. It's not even cigarettes on his skin. It's horrifying. And this, like, so yeah, choosing this to not go to school that day makes sense to me. She is trying to sort of connect with him as best she can, and it seems like she's succeeding. So when Claudia comes up to her and gets very territorial, she winds up holding Trante's hand and sort of giving Jana this very pointed look. There's a feeling of, because they were talking earlier, have you seen any dicks before that aren't your dad's? And Claudia admitted she had seen Trante's because we saw them together in the woods, where she just, like, basically told him, drop your pants. They made a deal. And so there's a feeling to me of her, like, looking at Jana being like, I just told you that I saw this guy's dick, and now you're out here with him alone in the woods, and I don't know what you think you're doing, but I saw his dick, and I feel like that's clearly signaling that I have dibs, and I don't know what language you speak, but I think a court of law would agree with me, so I'm going to take his hand, and we're going to walk away and leave you here. And, you know, knowing that she winds up not with him later, I'm very curious whether or not she wanted to be with him and he chose Jana instead. Whether she did not want to be with him and then sort of, like, realized her mistake after the fact. If, like, they had a falling out that caused him to impulsively go off with Jana and then regret it later. I have so many questions about what winds up happening between all of them. I don't know if I'll get the answers to it. It's fine if I don't, but I am curious. And because of the fact that we don't know who his parents are, I feel like I have to assume that this is Martha and Jonas's kid. But I just really don't have any evidence of that other than, oh, we just don't know who his parents are. That's just kind of it. And there's a lot of people in this that we don't have a clear idea, I guess. Like, well, the main person that I was going to say was Charlotte, but we know who her dad is, and her mother is her own daughter. God, this show. So I guess that's cleared up, but she doesn't know that yet, I don't think. I'm not sure if she knows who her mom is, I think, by now. They don't say in the episode, like, it's not explicitly said to her, hey, I'm your mom and I'm also your daughter, but it seems like she sort of gets it. Her dad, she has that one meeting with. So yeah, I guess that's pretty much a tied up end. That's not even a mystery anymore. So really, if I'm thinking about all of these characters, whose parents do we not know about? He's really the only one. Then there's the cop, Tiedemann. Is he Tiedemann? The Egon. Right. So, do we know who his parents are? And Hannah just got knocked up. But she's in this time. So for this kid to have been hers, she would have had to like go back in time even further and drop him off. And I don't see that. So who is of the correct age to be her child? There's some, I don't know. I'm running in circles here, everybody. Please forgive me. So when we start off the episode, after we get the initial introduction with Tronte and his creepy dads, there we see that Egon is sleeping with Hannah. Hannah. I've really turned the corner from like just hating her so much to being really sorry for her. You know, I feel like I understand her a little bit better now. And while it doesn't excuse some of the hateful shit that she has done, I have more of an understanding of this sense of desperation that comes from her just wanting to find a man somewhere in the world that won't let her down and be exactly the same as all the others. And I have known women in my life who have seemed to have never had a positive encounter with a male figure. I have a friend who was sexually abused by an uncle, a principal, physically abused by her father, got into more than one relationship with abusive men, whether it be emotionally or physically. And even when she went and got a job, had more than one encounter with a boss who sexually assaulted her, and then customers who she thought were just nice old men who then like propositioned her in the parking lot after work. And just sort of got to a point in their lives where they just felt men are an enemy. There's not a one of them that isn't constantly trying to take advantage of me in some way. And so I'm just going to have nothing to do with them anymore because none of them can ever be trusted. And I'm not mad at that. I mean, all the evidence points to you being correct. Why am I going to argue with what you have experienced? And eventually, a couple of them have found good-hearted partners that they are now happy with, and they were able to sort of see that there are some good ones out there, but by no means has that changed the reality for them, that was the one good one that they found in this sea of scum. So Hannah's position here, I'm starting to really understand it. Even Egon, who I have called a cinnamon roll, he is a better-hearted man than many that we have seen. I mean, I would say certainly better than Ulrich. Ulrich is peak selfishness in his way. It's not even that he's cruel for fun. It's that he's cruel because he genuinely just doesn't think of you. It's not about you, and it never was, and he's puzzled that you don't get that. But Egon is a man who I expected more from, and it's very clear so did she. She has this moment with him after they've had sex, when he's getting dressed and about to go to work, repeating the same pattern of sleeping with a married man and wanting something to be different this time. Girl. And there's a sense to him that he's having this affair because he has felt this distance between him and his wife. And we know that his wife was having an affair as well, which winds up being sort of like brought to the... She doesn't exactly tell him that she was, but there's a sort of understanding that he knew it was going on. And so she finally tells him this episode that she wants a divorce and basically says, we should have done this a long time ago. We're both like full of shit. We're both lying to each other about everything. I don't even know what we think we're doing. And so there's a sense to me of him like having an affair because he is so desperate for affection that he isn't getting from his wife, because I get the impression that she's gay, not bi. I don't think that she's like interested in him. And I could be wrong. It may just be about him, and that she just, she would be bi if there were a different type of dude involved. But the sense that I'm getting is that she's gay and just is not interested, and that isn't between them. And he knows. And so he's feeling sort of starved. And he goes to Hannah, who's also starved, and they find each other and want to, take what they need from the other. But each of them is in this weird, complicated situation. She's a fucking time traveler with a lot of weird baggage surrounding that, and just who she is. And he has his own baggage of being married and a, genuinely overall decent person, but in a very, screwed up relationship and feeling lots of guilt. And so he tells her in this scene as he's getting dressed and she's getting ready that he loves her. And she doesn't say it back, but she smiles at him in this way that really feels like this is what she's been wanting this whole time. Finally, there's a sense of that to me in her expression of I'm getting what I wanted. He comes up and gives her this St. Christopher medallion, which is what we see Martha wearing later on. If I'm not mistaken, it gets handed down. And she recognizes it, I think, when she looks at it and knows what it is. And he sees her face and thinks that she doesn't like it, and she explains it away. Later on, she has gone to the doctor because she's not feeling very well. He mentions that she looks pale. She says she's not feeling like herself. And she finds out that she's pregnant. And, oh my God, guys. The scene where she finds out is so well done, because it's a combination of her saying, no, that can't be, which I'm sure this doctor has heard any number of times. And the doctor trying to be well, some gifts are unexpected, but they're still gifts, in what I feel has to be one of the most rehearsed lines he's got in his arsenal. How many times has he had to say that? And then he lights a cigarette across his desk from the pregnant woman in his office and just smokes and talks to her about, guys, I can't handle seeing how prevalent smoking used to be in our, I know it. I remember going into restaurants where smoking was allowed, having smoking sections that did anything. And even down here, when I first moved down here, there were still smoking sections. They are not there anymore, but there were still smoking sections in several restaurants here. And yet, when I see people in movies and TV shows lighting up in a doctor's office like this, on a plane, that's the other one that always gets me, is just oh my God. I know the likelihood of the plane just going up in flames, spontaneously exploding because of a fucking cigarette is unlikely, but it just... So she goes, and there's a moment that this is something that I really will need your help on. If anybody in the chat wants to give me a little bit of insight into this, Egan's wife comes in, and she has this clipping from the newspaper, and reminder that the woman that she had been having the affair with, who is what's-his-face's sister. I'm trying to remember her name. Let me see if I can find it. She is trying to track this woman down, and she's playing it like it's because she, left her son behind, and she is worried about this child. Rightfully, later on, one of the creepy dudes is that's not what this is about. You're not worried about the kid. You are interested in the woman, which, yes, but also, ouch. And I'm trying to find her name. Is it Doris? Is she Doris? Agnes. The one she was in love with was Agnes, and Doris is his wife, right? Mm-hmm. All right. We're going to go with that assumption because nobody is telling me that I am wrong. So we'll do that. She has this newspaper clipping that she comes to Egan with. And she's trying to get him to see a connection that I didn't really understand. And I'm going to tell you, like, go through this line by line here. She says that she was doing laundry, and with Agnes's blouses, she found a, what do you call it? Handkerchief that had HJ embroidered into it. And then she pulls out this newspaper article. Now, I'm assuming, because he acts really weird here, I don't know if HT, Nina's here. Hi, Nina. Thank you very much for telling me, and also help, because I don't remember things. So, Rashawn and Ryan are here, and they have been extremely unhelpful, I don't mind saying, to both of you. So, thanks for nothing. Thank you, Nina. I'm flailing! Jesus Christ. HT. So, is this Hannah's, what do you call it? Handkerchief that she dropped by accident? And Doris is accidentally thinking that it's Agnes's, because Egan acts really weird when she hands this to him, like he recognizes it. So I'm thinking that it does not belong to Agnes the way she thinks it does. And he doesn't know how to tell her, because obviously. Nina says it might stand for Hanno Tauber, the priest in the newspaper. Okay, so that's her theory here, is what she's saying. She said her husband was with the church, and maybe it's just a coincidence, but the minister who disappeared at the same time is named Hanno Tauber. I was thinking that this was just like a whole thing that was unrelated, and she was making a mistake here because she didn't realize what was going on with Egan and Hannah, and that maybe, but Hannah doesn't seem like the type to carry around a monogrammed handkerchief. So that's probably not it. So yeah, she's saying this, and he says, I thought her husband was dead. And she says, it's been 3 months. You don't just leave your child alone without saying a word. And I don't know exactly what she thinks happened here. If she's concerned that maybe, like, Agnes got hurt or what. I mean, there's nothing really to go on. What would you think in her position, you know? And that's what she's sort of asking him, is like, why would she have left all of this behind? And he looks at his wife and says, who knows what goes on inside a woman's head? And he says it in this very pointed sort of like, because they're trifling and fuck each other in your house, on your bed. You know what I'm saying? He's got this look to him when he says it, and I was just like, oh my God, okay, chill. He's mad. And I'm like, no offense, dude. And I get you're mad because, like, she started it before you, but you did just come into your office with the stink of another woman on you. Maybe just, like, not throw stones for, like, the first 10 minutes that you're sitting in your chair across from your wife after you fucked somebody else. But it's very clear here. She's starting to get super agitated, wondering what happened to her friend. She really thinks something bad happened. So she goes to this church because she's trying to track down any, like, clues about what happened with this guy. And this is when she runs into that weird trio. And they are waiting for her, and the church is otherwise empty. It's incredibly creepy. And the way that she, like, look, this is my own bigotry, okay? And I'll be honest about that. But the way that she comes in to this dark, ominous church, and there's like 2 people in the pews on either side whom she does not know. There's a man standing there who, for the record, is not dressed like a priest. He's not actually, there's nothing about him save for where he's standing that would give the impression he has anything to do with this church. And she just goes in and just pours her heart out to this guy about what's going on and tells him, like, it just, the details, the general details. And I just can't imagine, like, being at ease enough in a place like this, in this kind of church atmosphere, with people that I don't recognize it's not just how not private this is, but it's also like places like that have these crazy acoustics, and I would just not want everybody knowing my damn business. The whole thing is so uncomfortable, all of it, and she just really doesn't seem aware of it, which feels in character to me because she's kind of innocent in her way. And she's also so driven by this panic she's feeling that I get how she would just not really give a lot of credence to these small things making her uncomfortable when, as far as she's concerned, her like lover's safety is at stake. But she pours out to him what's going on, and this is when he basically is like, the heart wants what it wants, and we know that you're into her. And he doesn't even like reprimand her for her interest, which I appreciated. It's not even like he's like, well, you cheated on your husband, what the hell. It's just sort of hey, you might actually want to check in on your husband because he's also fucking around and things aren't great between all of you, and you probably should get all of that shit figured out a little bit. And just drops this bomb on her. It's amazing to me that she doesn't ask him how he knows all of this. Because he's like, don't you wonder why he's going to work so early and coming home so late? And she doesn't say, how do you know who my husband is or what's going on? She just sort of takes it at face value that this guy does know. And it's, I mean, if I were in her if I were in her shoes in this scene, the creepiness overall of this whole moment would be enough for me to not want to question further. I would just sort of be like, you know what? I'm just going to act like you're totally right and walk out of there. But that would be me like humoring him in order to not cause a scene and potentially get hurt. She really seems to like believe him. And later on, she's waiting for Egan on the stairs. And clearly is like, yeah, you were definitely just with your bitch. And so that brings me to what happens with Egan and Hannah. She goes to tell him that she's pregnant. He understandably has one of those like grabbing his own head reactions where the news is so bad and so life-shattering that you feel like your brain is going to explode. He says to her, I thought you were taking precautions. And she laughs and sort of collapses into the chair across from him. And when she does, I really felt this in my soul. Did he ask her if she was taking precautions? Did he take precautions? I'm going to guess no on both fronts. But now that she's gotten pregnant, it's suddenly her responsibility to have taken care of all of that. He doesn't want to know about it. He doesn't need to know about it. As far as he is concerned, that's none of his business. He's just here to put his dick in. And whatever happens outside of that isn't really any of his concern. It's all on her to deal with it. And it's so clear that's what he means when he says this. And honestly, as good a dude as Egan is, I should have realized that, like, especially given the period that he has grown up in, he would have this kind of mindset. But then he follows it up with some really, like, and he says, is it mine? And he says it in this, like, way where I almost think he knew he was opening a real can of worms here. I don't know if what he intended was to insert enough doubt to have plausible deniability, or if he really thought that she was fucking around. But she looks at him, and I love her acting in this moment. She puts her purse down and stands up, and it's like she's seeing him for the first time. A moment of, I really did think you were not gonna pull this bullshit, and oh my god, it's right on cue. I swear to God, y'all are so predictable. It's just heartbreaking, honestly. What do you think I do all day long? Fuck around? Do you think it was me who chose all of this? Living in this shithole forever? I thought you were different, but you're all the same. You all think you own the world, that you can take what you want. You eat and fuck and think that you're God. Wherever you go, always the same smug fucking assholes. And he grabs her and says, you don't know what you're saying. And she looks down at his hands and the way he's grabbing her and stares at him. And she doesn't even have to say, get your fucking hands off me. He knows that's what she means, and he does. And eventually, she tells him, don't worry, I'm not keeping it. And you can see the relief all over his face. And he clearly feels really guilty, but he's 100% going along with it. He's going to pay for it. I'll give him that. And he gives her the name for somebody to go to that he has heard about that performs abortions, that allegedly does them safely and correctly. But god damn if that isn't the bare fucking minimum, you know? So she goes to this abortionist, and in the little waiting room is a very young girl. She looks like she's 15. She might be older than that, but she just looks tiny. I mean, maybe not even 15. And she gives her name as Helene. I can't remember the last name she gives. It was not a name that I recognized. Most people's names in this, even if I can't quite place who they are right away, I'll at least feel like that name was familiar. I didn't remember who she was. So if anybody wants to fill me in on what part she plays later on, because the way that Hannah reacts, she clearly knows who this is, if I'm not mistaken. And she sees the pendant, the St. Christopher pendant that Hannah is wearing, and compliments it, and is very intense about it, talking about how it's a nice idea to have somebody that you can feel is watching over you, guiding you along your way. And it's a kind of emotional, charged moment. And she gets up and goes into the room with the abortionist. And Hannah clearly has like a change of heart here. And she takes her necklace off and she leaves it with Helena's things. And she walks out and apparently decides to keep the child. So I don't know what that is going to be. And how long does Hannah stay here? Does she ever go back? If not, have we seen her as an old woman and didn't realize who she was at the time? I have a lot of questions about how this all shakes out. There's also a moment here with Claudia, and she's listening to her father on the phone talking about how nuclear power is the future and it can't be stopped. I don't care what the mayor says. And she's listening to this argument, and then her father comes out and sees her standing there, and he tells her how grown up she looks, and he gives her $10. And I wasn't entirely sure what this was for. Because it felt like he was paying her to shut up about something. Or no, this isn't her father. My bad. This is Helga's father. You'll be rewarded for your services. Okay, so what he's doing here is basically paying her to check out, to hang out with Helga and keep him company. That's what he's doing. I think I didn't understand this the first time. Nina says, I think the girl is Katharina's future mother. That makes sense because she really likes Hannah's name when Hannah tells her that her name is Katharina. And that's part of why I think that that Hannah starts laughing when she compliments her name, is knowing that likely this was the moment that caused her to choose this name. Like, I can't imagine how many times, if you did time travel, you would run into moments like this of realizing that you were inadvertently the cause for something to wind up the way it does when you were, living later on, and how low-key hilarious it would be every time it happened, this offhand meeting and the implications that it has for somebody's name, that is your rival, never, like, on top of everything. So this is the scene where that trio comes up against the guy who has control over the building permit. And this guy says too, I have advice. If you want something, you must take it. He says to Claudia, I almost forgot this. Things will never just happen on their own. And we see her later, when she goes to Tronte's room and gets undressed. And I feel like that is the first step towards that whole thing. The whole, like, seizing what she wants kind of attitude that she has. And we will continue to just see that manifested in her life. This is something that she really took to heart. And I have to imagine that this guy being extremely successful, allegedly, at the time when he gave her this advice, probably is part of why it sank in so much. Also, his wife goes to see Egon in a very bizarre scene. The actress who plays Helga's mother is so bonkers. I don't know what to make of her. She has this, like, vague sort of Nurse Ratched energy to her. She looks around without turning her head. She, like, reaches out to close the door without moving her arm too far out of her, like, away from her torso, so that it's just her hands and her eyes moving, but she's very, like, restrained and held tightly, and it is odd. And she is coming to find out if there is any news about the missing priest, evidently. And he asks if, first, unless Helga, like, tells us where he was, who he was with, talking about, what happened with him getting his face smashed in. And she says, this isn't about Helga. She's looking at him with this fucking face. This is about the missing minister. He totally misunderstands what she's even doing here. I love the expression that he gets when he realizes that it's not about her kid that got, like, brutally injured. And she tries to explain, well, if nobody looks after the church, it leaves the door open for the devil. And then gives him this look, and I'm like, girl, I can't tell if you want to, like, kill him and eat his heart or fuck him. Like, there's just, her face is just so much. And when he says, you knew the man, she gets very sort of, she tightens up even more. And he finally asks, did you ever see a woman with him? And she gets incredibly indignant at the suggestion. And part of me is like, did she hook up with him and she's jealous at the concept of him being with somebody else? Or does she view him as such a complete paragon of purity that the concept that he would ever, like, keep company with women is personally offensive to her idea of who he was? I just can't decide if she was having an affair or not. I don't think she was. She strikes me as the type to desperately want to have an affair, but never actually follow through on it because she has such rigid ideas of right and wrong. So I feel like there was a sort of one of those, emotional affair isn't even, like, quite the word, because that suggests more participation than was even happening between the two of them. But I feel like her and Noah just had one of those sort of eye-fucking relationships where you get together and you talk about all of the like right and proper things. And to the outside and anybody who happened to transcribe the conversation, it would sound totally as if you were above board. But anybody who's actually sitting in the room feeling the energy between the two of you knows that nothing you're saying is actually why either of you is here. And I think that's probably, like, I think she was just in love with him and never actually had anything real. She just, and I can't tell whether he feels the same way about her or if he was simply cultivating her feeling that way about him for his own uses because he knew how important Helga was going to be. But, all right. So I've gone through all of this and I've barely talked about what's going on with Hannah and Jonas. Not Hannah, Martha. Because this is the part of the show that I feel the most confused about. I watched, like I said, the last 15 minutes of the previous episode in the hopes that it would refresh enough to help me out. It didn't really, but the one thing that I saw that was like a little helpful is Martha escaping from 1888, I think it is, and, vanishing by stealing some of the material that she needs, the radioactive material. But there are two versions of her, one of whom is with Jonas, and this is when she runs into, I believe, the middle-aged version of herself, who explains everything to her for the first time about what's going on. And she's the one wearing the yellow rain slicker, which I am seeing as sort of a signal of somebody being roped into the time travel stuff for the first time. Jonas wore that yellow before he quite knew what was going on in the first season. And that's how I interpret the yellow raincoat, is to just be like, sort of like a big caution sign that like, oh, we're adding a new spoke to this wheel. And at first, like, he pulls her through the tunnel in the cave. And when they come out, and that's how the last episode ends, they're in this, like, desert. And it's obviously the same spot, but everything is dead. And the middle-aged version of herself is explaining everything that's going on. But Martha is thinking that she's in a dream. She isn't believing any of it. And it's not until later on when she sort of flees and he follows her that she finally listens to him and realizes that this is all really happening. And the middle-aged version of her tells Jonas, basically, I know that you want to save your Martha. You want to save both worlds. You can't. And you've seen what happens in the other one. So my recommendation to you is to make things work with this Martha, because you're going to have to pick a world to survive. And I recommend that you pick the one where she isn't already dead, because there's just not a way to change how that happened. So you could save the other world and not wind up with her anyway. If you make things work with her here, that would be better. And he doesn't seem to want to hear that in the moment. But then later on, when the two of them are finally together and talking about what's really happening here, there is this very strong connection that happens. And he takes her to his room. And I'm trying to find the spot where he does that, because when he does, I got a little bit mixed up in what version of time we're in, because the desert around the cave, to me, sort of signaled that all of Winden had been leveled. But I guess it's just that, all of the trees are dead, but the houses are still there? I'm not certain. I just kind of didn't expect for there to be a home. And yet he takes her to his room and she looks around and there's this like, you can clearly see a sort of deja vu feeling of like, oh my God, I feel like I recognize this place. When I saw you in school, I felt like I recognized you. And as somebody who has experienced that thing with a person who I then wound up marrying, it's a weird feeling and I get it. And this is when they wind up having sex. And there's that whole thing with Adam talking to her and explaining that the point of all of this was for the two of you to get together. That this was going to be like the goal, not stopping the apocalypse. So when he's talking to her, is this the same Hannah that leaves them in 1888? Is she like, are we seeing a slightly earlier version of her with Jonas? And then the version of her that's talking to Adam and then talking to, I can't remember her brother's name, but he's talking about, you know, when you abandoned us in 1888, I couldn't understand why you would do that. And now I'm sitting here giving the order for you to do it. And I can't believe that this is how this all happened. I couldn't tell whether or not that's, I keep calling her Hannah. I'm realizing that. Sorry, guys. Is that the same Martha? This was really the part that I found the most confusing, was like going between her with Jonas, her with her middle-aged self, then having her like apparently sort of, it feels like wake up while she's with her brother, which gives like the sensation that her body was sitting there waiting for her still when she was time traveling. But that's not how it's worked before. Her body actually vanishes. So I don't know if that was supposed to be that she was just waking up from a dream. But the way that time is working with these like different versions of her, I think throwing in all these different Marthas into the story has been what has confused me the most. Not to say that it's like, you know, bad plotting or anything, but I honestly can't tell you if it's good because I have so much trouble keeping track of it. So anybody who cares to enlighten me a little bit further on what's going on here, Adam like tells her, you know, that's what the whole thing was to get you knocked up, which honestly, rude. And then he, and also, can I just tell you, look, I know that Adam is Jonas. I know that, you know, that's how that all works. But regardless of that, he feels just like some creepy old man. And the fact that he's like touching her stomach and whatnot, the whole thing with people feeling like it's cool to just reach out and touch a pregnant woman's stomach is some of the grossest shit. I swear to God, that's like a big part of why I decided that I did not want to have children, was watching how people treated pregnant women like they were public property. I hated it even as a kid, and I found it weird. And then I grew up a little bit and I realized that was like a thing and I was disgusted. And that basically caused me to retract any consent for that culture at all. And let's see, we have another scene with the other Hannah, or no, Martha, Jesus Christ, if I could just get that right. Oh no, I'm jumping ahead. She has her hands over her stomach, and then we jump to the actual like stone, like family tree, character tree, whatever you want to call it, inlaid in the ground. And one of the creepy death trio staring at a painting of Adam and Eve with this expression on his face of such hatred. And it seems clear that we are supposed to think that he is here because, or he's doing what he's doing because he despises them. It feels like, but I can't be certain that's what's going on. I don't really, it feels like so much of what he's been doing has been in service of them, getting the nuclear power plant built and whatnot. I just can't quite tell. He always looks so angry that every expression sort of feels like despising somebody, you know? So I feel like that was pretty much everything, all of the major things this episode. But God, everything that's going on with Martha is really the part that's the most confusing to me. I don't really understand why she went back to 1888. Adam asked her, did you give it to him? And she says yes. She gave them the material to build the time travel thing with, is what I remembered from that. But it doesn't work. For whatever reason, they couldn't produce enough electricity to activate it, or there wasn't enough. I don't remember. But it doesn't work the first time. And I don't remember if that's by design or if it was going to work and she sabotaged it. I don't know why she'd go back to give them the material if she was going to sabotage it. But the whole way that this, with her like escaping from there, I just don't know why she was chosen. He says something about how he's always been too gullible. So she like deceived him on one front or another, but I don't really know what that was about. So anyway, all of this is me pleading for any of you guys who are listening to remind me of some basic stuff so that I don't have to go back and rewatch, an entire season in order to be able to keep up next time. Help. All right, I'm going to wrap up. Thank you so much to Yama for commissioning this episode, and I'm sorry that I didn't do a better job, but I'm trying. I really am. And in half an hour, I'll be doing the next episode of Cradle, which is the last one. The last chapters of the final book that has been released, which is tragic. And after that, I'll be doing Crazy Ex-Girlfriend. So if any of you want to join me for that, please do. All right, guys. I love you all. Until next time. Toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.